Knowing how to install and troubleshoot errors with power supplies is an essential skill that you're going to need to learn as a PC technician. While it's generally a pretty simple process, there are some things to look out for, especially since we're dealing with live power. So let's go through installing and troubleshooting a PSU together. So first off, I have my closed case friend back. And if you'll notice, there is a very large and very obvious area for our PSU to come into. I'm going to actually use what's called a non-modular power supply. All the wires are pre-attached. You can't remove any of them. It's a bit of a mess for cable management. However, for this demo, it fits perfectly. Now, before you touch any power supply, always make sure you unplug them, especially if they're ATX, because they're always going to have some bit of active power in them. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure everything is oriented right. I'm going to simply slide this in, and I'm going to line up those holes, grab my screwdriver, grab my screw, and I'm going to go ahead and screw this in. And there we go. It's as simple as that, installing a PSU. But you know what? Again, it's a little hard to see in this closed case, so let's go ahead and move this to the side. Let's bring in some cooler tech. Gonna go ahead and bring our buddy the open board in and our fancy dancy LED power supply. And you'll notice almost instantly, look Ma, no cables. This one's great. This is called a modular power supply. So these are fantastic because you only need to connect the actual cables that you need for your system. So you don't have a bunch of excess cables you have to run all over the place. These are really superb pieces of equipment. Now, one thing I want to make note of, if you notice, these little notches have specific shapes to them. So just keep that in mind. Some are more rounded and some are more square, and you'll notice the corners are square too, which actually helps you line up these cables in a much easier manner. So let's go ahead and connect this bad boy. And I'm going to take my 24-pin power cable for the motherboard, and I'm going to plug it in right here where it says main board on the PSU. And then I'm also going to take my CPU power, because modern day CPUs are very, very powerful and require power leads all to themselves. And now I have both of those connected, and I'm going to go ahead and connect them to the motherboard. So we go over here, and you'll notice we can either line up those notches, or generally you'll be able to find some sort of ridge or clip that this little mechanism goes in. And so if you see, if I line that up right there, these slide in, and boom, locks into place. And if it's a little hard to see that mechanism, because that really is important, that clip, let me go ahead and just do that so you can see right there. You see this clip? This is the one you want to make sure clips on that little ridge on the outside. You see that piece of plastic right there? It's a little hard to see, but that's what you're actually clipping down into. And if you've heard it clip, then you know it's got a good connection. All right, so I am ready to power this bad boy up. All I need now is some power. So let's go ahead and we're going to plug this in. And if you look at the back of this power supply, it's actually really easy for the orientation. I'm going to plug this in, and you'll notice it actually has a switch that's in the off position. This is a key thing to check when you're installing power supplies. A lot of times you'll plug it in, you'll be like, what the heck, I have no power. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and flip it on, and I'm going to hit our switch here that would normally be in the front panel. Great, everything's working. Oh, that's not good. We have the PSU shutting off randomly, and we also have the CPU shutting off randomly. Let's break out those CompTIA troubleshooting steps and see if we can't figure this out. First thing I'm going to do is practice proper power handling, and I'm going to disconnect this completely. And I think at this point it'd be really cool to introduce you guys to a new tool. And that tool is what's known as a power supply tester, or ATX tester. Right? So this thing's really cool. We can connect our 20+4-pin connector for the motherboard power, and we can also connect our CPU 8-pin power here, and we can kind of get a read on what's going on with our power supply and hopefully troubleshoot it. So I'm going to go ahead and take my motherboard side, and I'm going to plug that in, and I'm going to go ahead and take my CPU end, and I'm going to plug that in as well. There we go. Okay. All right, so we're installed there. We are in our ATX tester. I'm going to go ahead and put power back to the power supply. And let's go ahead and flip the switch on and see what we've got. Everything looks good here, but I'm not actually quite sure about those values. So I think this would be a good time to go ahead and shut down the power, remember those values, and let's compare them to our vendor information. And if I look at my manual for my power supply, I see that there's all these handy dandy charts of input and output specifications. And yet, you know what? It looks like I'm spot on. So we've identified the problem. We have no power, right? Now we need to establish a theory. Well, we know the PSU works, and by default, since we tested with the same cables that we had on the motherboard, we know the cabling works. I'm going to guess that I probably didn't have those cables firmly seated. That's going to be my theory. So let's, you know what, we've established that theory. Let's go ahead and test it. We've got our power removed. I'm going to go ahead and pull out my CPU 4-pin connectors and my 20 plus 4-pin connector and set this really cool PSU tester off to the side. Now I'm going to come back in, reinstall my 24-pin MOBO connector here. Make sure that's seated down really well. I'm going to connect my CPU power now and make sure that they're really seated down well. I kind of want to make sure I hear that click. That click is crucial. Okay, there we go. And let's see what we got. I'm going to go ahead and plug my power back in. I'm going to flip on the switch on the back of the PSU, and I'm going to verify that I have full system functionality. Unlimited power! This is fantastic. So we just troubleshot this entire system here on this motherboard. We had some sort of weird power issue. I'm going to guess that I just didn't have those cables firmly seated, right? But you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I document the findings, because this is actually something pretty simple that a lot of people can do, especially if you're putting together a system in a hurry. It's very easy to overlook, really seating those things down. But the important thing here to remember is that I followed the CompTIA A+ troubleshooting theory steps, and I was able to determine where the issue was and how to fix it. And also, I want to tell you that it's kind of pretty easy to tell you if your PSU has died out, right? You can simply look at your system, and if it's not powering on, or the power supply fan isn't spinning, or the CPU fan isn't spinning, and everything else has been tested, you generally have a PSU issue. However, you might also see some symptoms like random reboots, or if you have a motherboard that has a built-in speaker, you might hear those error codes on startup, or the system can simply lock up. That's what happens. But again, by following the CompTIA A+ troubleshooting theory steps, we can quite easily troubleshoot and find a resolution for just about any problem.